Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the wonderful, the amazing Brittany-Nichole Connor-Savarda. And Brittany is all about making a difference in the area of emotional and generational trauma. And this is going to have a little bit of a spin, I think, about we're going to hear from her shortly, the familial societal kind of spin on it. And also, she wants to touch base on toxic social norms. So I'm super stoked. Glad to have you here, Brittany-Nichole. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Kim. I appreciate it. I'm excited. I can nerd out on this stuff all day long.
You can nerd out right here with us because I think it's also, you and I were talking about earlier about, things being authentic and relatable. And we both know the statistics on those touched by trauma. So it's a lot of people. So maybe Brittany-Nichole, we can start out with what caught me with you sent me some bullet points. The power of letting go of control and how this is sort of counterintuitive as you put it. I think of it as we just want to naturally dig our claws in to control everything because then we think it's going to make us feel better. And tell us about the power of letting go and what the whole thing with growth and development, the whole thing.
Most definitely. So I want to take it a little bit back to where I came from and how all of this relates to why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Because when I was younger, I was diagnosed with OCD, which is obviously lots of control there, and ADD and GAD. And a lot of this stemmed from not feeling like I had control growing up as an only child. I had parents who were extremely anxious, very controlling, very sheltering. And so that just kind of turned into I've got to gain some sense of control back of my life. But because I lacked self awareness and I also struggle with anxiety, I had no clue how to gain control of my life. And I have spent the past 12 years on this self discovery journey, which has led to the work that I'm doing today to kind of help others with overcoming their own challenges with generational, familial, emotional trauma and toxic social norms, right? And so all of that kind of led me to realize that not only in my personal life was I trying to gain control, there was all these elements to becoming an entrepreneur that I was trying to control, which you learn very quickly anytime you have a business that there are many things that you can't control. You can't control people saying yes to you. You can't control how things are going to go or the demand of the clients, all of this stuff. And I just reached a breaking point of I've either got to let go of a lot of things or I'm going to be an utterly miserable, anxious person the rest of my life because I'm clinging to so many things. And so for me, letting go and releasing control paradoxically gave me more control.
Right. Tell us how. Tell us how.
Because you realize what is really important and you develop a more keen awareness of yourself and how the universe works and how our mind works and how other people operate. And so there's this level of acceptance. And I wouldn't say a lot of people assume sometimes that acceptance means like just giving up, throwing in the towel.
Right.
But it doesn't at all. It means having this level of wisdom to understanding how things operate and being hyper intentional with where you place your focus and action. And it was such a beautiful thing because I remember, within my business specifically, I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, without taking any time off, not a single day for 8 straight months. And I'm like, what did I get myself into? I cannot keep doing this.
Right, right,
And so
right.
I had to analyze all of the things I was doing in my business, all the control I was trying to have. And it wasn't until I got COVID where my body was like, sorry, there's no way you can do all of this anymore, that I had to really look and prioritize what I was doing in life. And when I let go of so many things that I was trying to do and trying to control and thought was important, I realized, that was all a figment of my imagination. And when I put it to the side and really set my intentions on what was important and what I could control and what really made sense, I started working 5 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and nothing really changed,
Of
which was
course.
just amazing.
Wow, the less is more. It's interesting because the guest I had on uh, right before you was talking about that different context, but of the very same thing about sometimes we're so conditioned that the more hours we put in,
Yes.
the bigger the results. When in reality, and there's that actually he brought up that book by Greg McCowan, Effortless. Have you heard of
Mhm,
that one? When
mhm.
in reality, and I'm not dismissing a great work ethic, I'm all about
Right.
it, but that thing where we think the hours equal the results
Yeah,
is false.
right.
And here, like, so what do you think happened with that shift with you? Because you're doing less hours. What did you gain from that? You gave up, that's a third of the hours per day, roughly.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you think? What was the shift there?
The shift was, you and I kind of through email was talking about doing versus being, right?
Hmm.
And we're a society of doers. We think
Oh,
doing
totally.
more, cramming
Mhm.
more into our schedule makes us superheroes. And I realized I was doing a lot of things that I was told by others that I needed or should do, air quotes, because that's what they did and that's what worked for them. And that was quote unquote the recipe for success or happiness or fulfillment, whatever label you want to place on it. And we're told this by so many people, but we
Mhm.
don't necessarily take the time to see where our life path is going and what our intuition is telling us that works for us. And so we just feel like we have to do social media and do a podcast and write a book and do workshops and write a blog and have all these things in order to be seen and heard. And I just had to realize like I'm getting nowhere with certain platforms. So why
Right.
am I going to keep putting the effort into doing this? What speaks to me? What brings me fulfillment and energizes me instead of depletes my energy? And I realized that I love writing. I'm an introvert. I
Mhm.
don't like to be the center of attention. And so social media is not for me when it comes to, making video content or reels all the time.
Mhm.
So I write and I enjoy writing and I that's where I put my energy. And also building deeper relationships. And I just accepted that that was who I was
There
and
you
that's what
go.
worked for me.
Oh, I love that. If only, and I think that sometimes it's just a tough sell for people because especially the younger because at a fabulous 59, now I have stuff out there in social media too, but I have a quite a limit because like, I have quite a limit because I'm all about being in the moment. And so, but the younger you go back, I think they're conditioned to all those things you said. I have to this, I have to that, I have to be,
Mhm.
and here in life minutes are just circling the drain,
Yeah.
just evaporating, right?
Mhm.
Until we find what really, and you said something else, Brittany, Colin. You said it differently. What I heard from you was that inner voice. I think you said intuition.
Mhm. Mhm.
Listening to our inner voice, like I'm out in the woods every morning, unless it's a monsoon. And it's just, I think we're so conditioned that we have to do, human doing instead of human beings, that when we don't realize, because you said a counterintuitive, when we stop and get quiet is when the floodgates open.
Oh my gosh.
It's like the
You
more
said
you
it
let go, the
perfectly.
more right?
Yes. I could not agree with you more. And that was something that I learned myself about 2.5 years ago. I started to really practice deep meditation and quieting the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would rephrase that and say decluttering the mind versus quieting the
Oh, I
mind.
love it. Feng shuiing the mind.
Yes. And I'm looking at the woods now, so we're fortunate. We live just 3 miles outside of Center City, Charlotte, but we're also attached to Renaissance Park, which has hundreds of acres and about 6.5 miles of trail.
Mhm.
And so I just go out walking on the trail sometimes. I take my coffee with me and I just sit and I don't think about anything. I just allow, right?
Well, that's such a good word. I use that in my podcast a lot.
Yeah. And you said it perfectly. The floodgates open. And when you set an intention and you don't try to think about it, right? Because
Mhm.
thinking is a function, thinking is
Right,
doing, it's not being.
right.
When you just set an intention, pose a question, and leave it, and then just allow yourself to be present with the moment, the answer just comes to you.
Yes.
And that's what has guided me for the past 2.5 years. And I wish people would understand the power of that. But until you've experienced it, you're going to continue to try to manifest that answer. You're going to try to work through your problem. But talk to anyone who's been trying to solve a problem for, a day or a week or a year, whatever, and they're thinking about it. When does it come to them? When they're driving home from work, when they're in the shower,
Just
when
you said
they're
a
walking their
shower.
dog,
Yeah.
when they're not thinking about it,
Right.
when they release it, again,
Mhm.
letting go of that control, that release of a need, and then there it is. Again,
The
counterintuitive.
universe takes care of it, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever your label is
Yeah, whatever your
for that.
label is.
Whatever your
Yes.
label is takes. I love the allowing thing, and it does seem like you just said, we have to kind of retrain the brain away from what we've been taught with that,
Yes.
because really for me it's the woods, and where we are very,
Mhm.
very rural. So I don't, it's not like going down to a popular hiking spot and you're like, hi, hey, hi. I see nobody except my golden retriever. And it just floods. I mean, it's almost like a faucet you can't shut off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that you'd want to, but it just like,
Yes.
so what do you think? I know Brittany-Nichole, I was seeing, so I'll go, how do we, okay, so this need to control that I think probably lots and lots of our listeners are relating to you with right now, because when we get scared, that's what we try to do, right?
Yeah.
And life is full of fearful things. How that is sort of a primitive wiring that we have. It's based in survival mode, right?
Mhm.
And so how to develop awareness around this, and about this trying to control the uncontrollable. How do we help our listeners get to that place?
I think, and I want to speak from my process, right? Because I think everybody can get there in their own way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, there's not a one way of doing things, I found out. And that's another thing, control, right? Whenever I work with clients, for the longest time, I was trying to control their actions for how they got to where
Mm-hmm.
they needed to be. And then I started to realize, like, oh, that worked for me, but maybe it won't work for them.
Maybe it won't work for them, right?
So for me, it's about asking ourselves questions. I genuinely believe that we can find the answers to anything within ourselves. And when I say within ourselves, some people, say, well, I don't necessarily believe that I have all the answers. I don't know what I don't know. And I understand that from the primary conceptual level that we're taught, right? Like we have to acquire outside information to be able to understand things. But I don't know about you, but when I am in those states of consciousness,
Mm-hmm,
so to
mm-hmm.
speak, there are things that I don't feel like are coming necessarily from my knowledge, but like a collective. And I understand people may not believe in like a whole universal consciousness, like that may be too woo-woo for some people. But when I tell you that answers come to me that I would have never really have thought of
Right.
myself, but it just comes to me and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's such a deeper level of understanding than I ever thought possible. But it didn't always happen that way. So for me, it started by just really developing self awareness,
Right.
understanding where is this need for control coming from.
Hmm.
And I realized that for me, it was because of insecurity, right? Growing up,
Honest.
seeing
Yes.
my parents model that behavior, and hyper control to me is showing how insecure I am in whatever area of my life.
Hmm.
Also, having faith, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in a religious sense, but realizing that pain and discomfort and pleasure, all of these are psychological, right? Even if it's coming from nerves. Like when you think about discomfort or fear, all of that is self manifested
Right.
because we can
Well,
have fears. Nothing's happening. We're perfectly
mhm.
safe. So we're either living in the past or we're living in the future. We're not
Not the
necessarily living in
present.
the present,
Right.
right? So it's all these narratives that we have. And so developing a heightened awareness to our internal narratives to realize like what am I feeling right now? What is my impulse telling me? Is it if I don't do this thing, then I'm going to be hyper anxious?
Right.
Well, what about doing that thing will make you less anxious? Well, I feel like I'm altering the outcome to that, right?
Right.
Well, where
Right.
is that outcome coming from? It's coming from an internal narrative. Is that internal
100%.
narrative true or
100%.
false?
A
Right?
hundred
So it's
percent.
asking yourself all these questions. Is this true or is this false? What proof do I have? What am I basing this on? Is it based on experience? Is it based on indoctrination? Is it based on what somebody has told me? Is it based on intuition? Where is this coming from? So that's kind of how I started, was just asking myself a ton of questions to drill down. And then once I realized, like, the final question is, well, do I have control over this outcome? And is it worth putting whatever energy into it to ensure that that is the outcome that I get? And if
Right.
it's not, what is the worst case scenario? And is that worst case scenario psychological or is it actually physically manifested?
No, I love this. It's on several different levels. And actually, Mindcraft, the podcast, came out of an in person course I teach, which is Mindcraft colon become the boss of your brain, which is about learning to manage this monkey chatter. That
Yeah,
because a lot of people think these thoughts are based in facts, and the high majority of it isn't.
right.
And so we allow, and obviously thoughts lead to feelings. So if we have an anxious monkey chatter thoughts, we are then feeling anxious. That's what happens. And
Mhm.
so once we learn to, nip it in the bud and control the thinking, lo and behold, we don't feel anxious anymore, not as much, right? Another thing you said, Brittany-Nichole, is the outcome thing. I'm so big on that, which goes along with your control talk is, and that's taken some work because I know I sometimes would think less now, but still sometimes. And when we let go of our attachment to outcome, it's amazing what happens. Like we can stay with the general, okay, I want the best case scenario for this situation. But when we box it in that it has to look like this, that gets stressful.
Yeah. And we can also create self-fulfilling prophecies, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then when we have the outcome that is exactly what we expected, we say, "Well, I knew, see, this is exactly what I expected to happen."
Hmm.
But how much of that did you manifest? Because I've been in situations where myself and the other person were having the same experience. We're going through the exact same challenge. at the exact same time in the same room. It's not like, two life situations that are similar. We're in it together.
Mm-hmm.
And my reaction to that situation looks extremely different to their reaction.
Right.
My nervous system may be calm. My heart rate is not out of control. My breath is regulated. I have zero anxiety around it because I don't know what's to come. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm just dealing with what is in front of me and telling myself to every problem there's a solution or there's an
Absolutely.
experience for learning. So either I'm going to find a solution or I'm going to learn from this experience,
I
right?
love
That's
that.
my narrative.
Yeah.
Their narrative, they're just in chaos, right? And I've been there. I
Mhm.
was that
Mhm.
person, like
Right.
hyper chaotic, can't think straight, worst case scenario. My brain is just so scrambled from my nervous system being out of whack
Mhm.
that I feel like I am having a panic attack, right? That's kind of the situation they're in. And I say feel like I am because that's where I've been, right?
Right,
But
right,
this
right.
person can be in that situation and I'm observing them and I'm thinking, here's the exact same scenario that we're in together,
Mhm.
two different realities. And they just can't fathom, how are you so calm? How are you not?
Right.
Because I'm dealing with what's at hand. I'm not getting lost in what could happen. I'm not getting
100%.
lost in the emotions of that experience.
100%. And preaching to the choir with that one, right? Because I'm all about mindfulness, and which is just people get it confused with meditation, I think, and it can be overlappy, but really it's just about being in your life and being engaged, but being in the moment. That's the thing, right, Brittany
Yeah.
Nicole? Because people don't realize anxiety doesn't exist in the moment. If you're
Yes.
if you're in 100% in this moment, because the thought has to be there first. So if you're
Yes.
not thinking about anxiety, you can't. It's neurologically impossible, right? So if we're not in the past, we're not in the present. Life's pretty good in the moment,
It's
and more manageable.
it's funny that you say that because as I told you, I'm 36 weeks expecting my first. And I've always heard, people are going to give you unsolicited advice. They're going to
Mhm.
tell you what to do, what not to do, what they did, etc. But another thing that I notice is people will tell you the state of mind that they were in when they were about to give birth or when they were in labor and delivery. And they will impose that on you because so many people, right now, my baby is not in a good position. So I could potentially have to have a C section. And while I am hoping to give a natural or have a natural birth,
Mhm.
I am in the mindset that, whatever happens, happens. As long as this baby comes into the world and I'm healthy and he's healthy, that's all that matters. And I know a lot of people say that, but they don't actually really feel that or want that. They still have attachments and expectations to, they're hoping for the best, they're hoping for what they wanted.
Right, right,
I
right.
literally have zero expectations. And so I have zero anxiety. And equally, I have zero excitement, which confuses people. They're like, you're not excited about having your baby? And I'm like, I mean, I'm not excited.
But
Like,
he's not
I'm
here yet.
I'm just I'm just here. Today
Right.
I don't have a baby. Today I'm just pregnant, and when I'm comfortable, and when I'm not comfortable, I'm like, "Ugh, I'm not comfortable." But I'm so
In the moment.
blasé. I don't know. Like, blasé may not be the right word. I'm just very
You're just in the
neutral.
moment.
I'm in the moment. And so whenever I pose that to people like, well, if I have to have a C-section, I have to have a C-section. They're like, "Oh, well, don't worry, don't stress about it, don't freak out." I'm like, I'm not like I'm not freaking out. you know. Um but it's so funny that so many people like impose that on you
Right,
because
right,
they
right.
can't fathom. Like, "Oh my gosh, you should be so anxious right now." About what?
Why? How does it
Why?
help
Why am I
anything?
gonna create extra stress in my life that doesn't need to be
What
there?
does it help anyway?
It
And
doesn't.
In reality, with the technology in 2024, you're going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah,
You have a
and
big,
even if it wasn't, I would deal with whatever the challenge was at hand as it happened,
right, right, right.
right?
Great attitude.
It just and it's changed my life. Like, it is literally completely changed my life. Like, my level of anxiety is practically 0. Now, that is not to say that I don't get angry or upset in the moment, right? But even when I do get angry or upset in the moment, I still talk myself through, where is this coming from? Is
Right, right,
this, again, an insecurity being triggered from my past where I'm taking something personally that has nothing to do with me?
right, right.
Is
Good.
it a righteous anger because I really want to see change in the world? And so my anger is coming from a justified place, but I learn how to channel that anger into something productive versus harmful.
Hmm.
It's
I
all
like
about
that.
just being, like you said, being mindful.
Being my people, like I say, Brittany and Nicole, like people that I think many people don't realize that the letting go. I mean, it's obviously super Buddhist, just and also to not be attached to outcome. That your life, like you were saying, gets so much easier because because when outcomes are out here, whether it's the outcome of a birth or it's the outcome of planning a wedding or it's the outcome of talking with your toxic boss next week or whatever it is, we have our own happiness and calmness and inner peace and joy attached to something that's out here. That means we're
Yes.
giving control over our feelings to other
100%.
people and circumstances. We bring that stuff back in the living room and we can be happy anywhere
Yeah.
and calm anywhere.
Yeah. That Buddhism and Stoicism, right? Like, the Stoic philosophy is also kind of just not being attached
Just
to
not being.
anything.
And don't you think people sometimes get that confused? Like that being detached, it's also a very 12-step program because sometimes there are family members, no matter what, whether 12-step program or not, but maybe a young adult child or something, or a partner is making some bad choices, and how you can detach with love. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
some people get
Mhm.
confused that means you don't love people or
Right.
you're cold hearted. No, it's zero to do with that. It has to do with detaching from any kind of in a healthy way, right? Just
100%.
separating like an observer.
Yeah. Yes.
Sort of.
Yes. And so I recently pivoted. I was working with organizations and leaders, specifically, I don't know why it just became a thing for me, male entrepreneurs, on like developing emotional intelligence, so conscious awareness, etc. But since I've been expecting, I've shifted more to expecting parents and parents. And what triggered that was when I was 4 months, I had a conversation with my mom because, again, I didn't want my child subjected to the same
Mhm.
toxic behaviors and mindsets that I was subjected to. And I approached it with compassion and understanding. I didn't make any accusations. I went into it with just trying to have a conversation. Um, and it went really, really, really poorly. I honestly did not envision it blowing up into what it did.
Turned into, yeah.
And the thing was, I had always thought, like, okay, I've been doing all this self work for 12 years. I understand what effective communication is. I understand emotional intelligence, empathy, blah, blah, blah. And I understood it at an intellectual level at one point, but then I took it to a deeper level, right? Like, a really embodying that from, like, truly understanding and coming from a place of compassion. Because if we do it just from an intellectual level, we can get in our ego and think, well, I'm the bigger person here. And then
Right,
that's
right,
going to come
right,
across
right.
in our communication. So I wasn't like approaching it like I'm doing things better than you did. It was just more of like, let's have this conversation. And I just assumed that because I was coming from love and understanding and empathy, that it would be received differently. And I realized shortly after that it doesn't matter where we're coming from
Mm-hmm.
as much as where the state of mind that that person is in. If
Yes.
they are hypercritical of themselves, then they're going to take whatever you say as criticism, right? And an attack.
Because it's their filter.
It is their filter. Yes. And it's just like, it's almost like this emotional frequency that they have, right? And I was able to go into that situation, and you don't know until you're in it, right? Like sometimes we say, "Oh, I'm good. I'll be able to handle that situation well when it
Mm-hmm.
happens." But then when it happens, it really tests where you are. And
Right.
I was pleasantly surprised that my nervous system was so calm. My heart rate didn't elevate. I didn't get a shaky voice. I didn't get nerves. I didn't feel the anger that I would have had before, or the resentment that would build up, or the need to prove something to them. I just listened and I was okay with it. And I let them say what they said. I let them feel what they needed to feel. I was very conscious about pointing out, I'm sorry that you're making the choice to take what I am saying this way. I was very conscious with my words because at the end of the day, it is a choice. They are choosing not to receive, they are choosing not to accept where I'm coming from. But at the end of the day, that is their choice. And they would say, "You made me," or "You think this about me," or "You feel blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Look, you can feel what you want to feel. You can think what you want to think. But I want to make the clear distinction between what you think that I think versus what I actually think, and allow me to offer clarification on what I truly think and feel instead of you defining that for me." That's where I draw the line. And setting those boundaries, saying, "Look, you can have these emotions and you can think that I'm coming from a place of XYZ, but this is the reality of it. Now you can accept that or not, and that's up to you going forward. But I'm not going to feel guilt or shame when I know that I'm coming from a place of compassion, genuine compassion, just because you're in that emotional state." And I see so many expecting parents and parents, or even people in any form of relationships. It could be a spouse, a coworker,
Right, right, right.
anything. We aren't honest and open in communication, which causes more issues, because often what happens is we end up ghosting people to avoid that difficult conversation, or we react later on because all these little things have built up over time and we're holding on to all of it, and then we just release it and they're like, "Where did that come from?" And so then that creates more problems. I am just hyper honest with people,
Right.
and I think even that gets misconstrued by our ego mind, right? Like what honesty means, because are we coming from the place of the ego, or are we coming from a place of deep understanding and
And
selflessness
authenticity,
and
right?
authenticity? There you go. So depending on where that's coming from, but after I do that and I have both of our best interests at heart, the outcome is not in my control,
Right.
right?
That's so healthy, in my opinion, right? Because whenever you
Yeah.
bring human beings together, anyway, we're all complex. It's going to play out the way it's going to play out. We don't really have control over that,
Yeah.
right?
Things don't have to go well for them to go well. I know that
Right.
seems weird, but it's like the other person's reaction shouldn't be a determining factor in how you feel about how things were expressed and what you choose to do going forward.
No, I like that.
And that's what detachment is, right?
Right, right. It unfolds how it unfolds,
Yeah.
which is the truth, right? And I really like that a lot. It doesn't have to go well to go well. That's
Yeah.
a super good quote. I like that a lot. And definitely the letting go. It is so counterintuitive, but I know for me, things go way more smoothly when I just go into a meeting or whatever. This is going to unfold the way it's going to unfold to help me ride the wave, because this is
Yes.
just how life goes. Thoughts keep coming, people keep doing what they're doing. Just help me navigate, and that's that, the universe just comes together and it all works. Okay, so this is fantastic. Brittany-Nichole, how about let's maybe wind up with, since we've had a lot of talk about mindfulness and living in the present moment. So maybe we can you can offer some tips and tricks to our listeners. It's just as far as like the benefits, and maybe a couple strategies, just something just basic for them, little nugget for them to take with them.
So, as far as strategies go, what really helped me was to journal.
Oh, totally.
And if you don't like to write or type, then record yourself talking in the moment. Record yourself when you're feeling a certain way about something or someone, and just really be honest and express yourself. And then come back to that later and really start to, I mean, it allowed me to see, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was that angry or where that anger was coming from. I wasn't thinking
Right.
clearly. It's kind of like writing an email to someone and then waiting to send it for either a few hours or a day until you've cooled off. And you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, it really does help bring that conscious awareness to things. In terms of the benefits, like I said, I have practically zero anxiety these days. Like, I don't want to say that I have zero anxiety because I can't say for absolute certain, but I can't think the last time
But
that
it's really
I
low.
was anxious. Yes, extremely low. Um, my energy, I wake up and I don't dread the day. I don't have those butterflies in my stomach. I used to have extreme social anxiety. I mean, extreme, where sometimes I'd be in a fetal position before I went to an event, or I would just cancel going altogether because I just couldn't handle it. And that just takes a
Wow.
toll
Wow.
on your body and your mind and your
Exhausting.
energy. Yeah, you're always in a fight or flight response. And so being able to wake up and just appreciate the day and appreciate the small things, because we always hear, be grateful. And I think gratitude is another way to bring yourself to the present moment.
Totally.
But I think a lot of people struggle to find gratitude because they're always so anxious or in that stress response that they see their challenges before they see the things that they have. And when I tell you, like, I can look at a tree just like blowing in the breeze, and I'm just so grateful to be able to experience nature. Or I'm so grateful that, I have filtered water. I know that sounds silly to some people,
Not to me.
but I really appreciate the smaller
Mhm.
things, which leads to me not having any wants or desires. And when we don't have wants or desires, I mean, isn't that the whole key to fulfillment? We talk about abundance.
Oh,
And I know I'm like kind of
absolutely.
veering off, but like I feel like I have more abundance in my life. And I think that gets misconstrued with materialism. But abundance is the lack of needing stuff, right? The lack of desire,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm. I
I don't
love
really
it.
have any desires. I'm so content. I used to be a shopaholic. Like when I was stressed or anxious, the first thing I would do was go shopping, right? It made me feel so much better.
Right. Instant dope fix. Right.
Now I'm
Totally.
trying to get rid of stuff. I'm like, I want to minimize the clutter in my life. When you start to minimize it up here in your head,
Oh, 100%.
you start to minimize it in reality, like in the physical world too. And you realize, like, having less is having more because space allows. When you have things, it doesn't allow for more in your life, right? So it's the space, it's the emptiness of both the mind and the physical world that allows for new things to enter. And so there's that flow of life versus the stagnation of hoarding.
Oh, so many wisdom bombs here. I love it. I love it. It makes me think of you ever listen to Aaron Doughty and the law of subtraction? not
Mm-mm, yeah.
attraction, subtraction. He says the same thing. Like get rid. He uses the example of metaphorically of having like a walk-in closet packed with all new outfits and not sorry, not new, but packed with clothes and shoes and everything. He said, but like let's say you want a partner, or you want something like new creativity or new job or travel or whatever it is. Think of it like the closet. If you want a new outfit, but there's no room,
Right.
guess what's not coming to you?
Yeah.
Because all these old shoes you haven't worn in 10 years are all like, so
Mhm.
metaphorically, I think it fits well with what you're saying, Brittany-Nichole, because we have to, like, creating that space also opens the door for better relationships, for
Yeah.
creativity, all the non-thing things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and
And
when you don't seek it, it truly comes into your life. It's the most, again, bizarre, counterintuitive thing, but it just, surrender, release, and allow.
I love
It's
it.
just yeah,
Surrender, release, and allow. I love it. A lot of the greatest spiritual leaders say the same thing. And like yourself, it's too bad you're way down in Charlotte. We could go for a walk because we think very, very similarly. And being in that receiving mode, which is so important. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation.
I've
Brittany,
really enjoyed it too.
yes, it's
I
been
could go on
so.
for hours with you.
Well, we can do a part two at some time. At some point, I've had guests on sometimes two and three times. So for now, we've got Brittany-Nichole Connor-Savarda, who is emotional intelligence, emotional trauma, generational trauma specialist, and also just did a stellar job and very courageous job of sharing her own personal story with anxiety and coming out on the other side. I know it's a work in progress for all of us, but you've done it. It sounds like you've done a heck of a job with learning through lots of work to keep yourself in the eye of the storm, no matter what's going around you. And that is fantastic and ultra relatable given the anxiety in the country and world. So thank you, Brittany-Nichole, for being here with us on the Mindcraft podcast.
I appreciate it so much, and thank you for a lovely conversation. I love having these deep conversations with people.
It was just the best. So thank you.
Yeah.